They say blood is thicker than water, but no one ever talks about what happens when that blood runs cold. I'm 43 now. Name's David Price. I live in Missoula, Montana. Quiet place, mountains in the distance, enough snow to remind you you're alive. I run a logistics company. I started from nothing, and lately I've been thinking a lot about where I came from and who I had to leave behind to get here. This story isn't easy to tell, but I guess it's time. When I was 10 years old, my parents divorced. No fights, no shouting matches, just silence. One day, we were a family. The next, I was sitting on the porch with a duffel bag, watching Mom pull away with a new man in the driver's seat. No budvi, no explanation. Dad was gone a week later, said he needed space, and next thing I knew, I was bouncing between their new households like an unwanted guest. Dad had a girlfriend half his age with a toddler who threw tantrums in Target. Mom got remarried to a man who thought discipline meant ignoring me entirely while spoiling his own daughter like she crap gold. I became an accessory, a ghost in their homes. I don't remember ever being asked how I felt. Not once. The only person who saw me was Aunt Carol, my mom's older sister. She lived in Helena and worked as a librarian. A quiet woman with sharp eyes and soft hands. She didn't have kids of her own, but when she found out what was happening, she showed up at my school one day with a court order and a peanut butter sandwich. Just like that, she took me in. I spent the rest of my childhood in her care. She was kind, but no nonsense, and I think I loved her more than I ever loved my parents. She never talked about them, just told me I was worth something, even if they didn't see it. Fast forward. I went to college on scholarships and a part-time job cleaning dorm bathrooms. Started my own delivery service in my late 20s. Long hours, sleepless nights, but I made it. And a year ago, Carol called me into her study and handed me an envelope. It was my grandfather's will. Turns out he left her nearly $2 million, but she didn't need it, she said. She wanted me to have it. For my business. For my future. For all the years I spent building something from ashes. That money changed everything. Not just my life. My parents suddenly remembered I existed. It started with a letter. Not a call, not a visit. A letter from my mother, neatly folded, perfumed like she tried too hard. She wrote that she hoped I was well, and that her new husband's daughter, Emily, had just gotten accepted into a very prestigious private college. Then came the ask, tuition help. Just a little, she said, just to get them started. As if I'd forgotten the years I spent sleeping on Aunt Carol's couch while she redecorated her new stepdaughter's bedroom. That letter went straight into the shredder. I didn't even finish reading it. Then came my dad. He didn't bother with a letter. He showed up, just knocked on the glass door of my office one Monday morning like we were on speaking terms. My receptionist looked nervous, said there was a man outside who claimed to be my father. Claimed. That says everything, doesn't it? He looked older, smaller than I remembered, but his voice still carried that same practiced remorse, like he was playing a part he'd long since memorized. He started with a sob story. He'd fallen on hard times. Said he had debts, credit cards, back rent on a place I didn't even know he lived in. Claimed he thought of me every day, that he regretted not being there. Said something about family sticking together and how proud he was of what I'd built. I just stared at him. All I could think about was the night I turned 11 and got a fever so high I hallucinated. I called both their houses, neither picked up. It was Carol who found me in bed, soaked in sweat, whispering nonsense. She drove me to the ER in her nightgown. So no, I didn't care about his debts or his regrets. I told him, calmly, maybe too calmly, that I didn't owe him anything, that I'd paid for my own life, step by step, without a cent from him or Mom. He blinked like I'd slapped him. Then the mask cracked. He said I was ungrateful, that I was being petty, that I should help my real family. That was when I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just asked him to leave. And for once, he did. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. About a week after the incident with my dad, my phone lit up with a notification I hadn't seen in years. A friend request from my mom. That's how low the bar had dropped. Not a call, not a knock on the door, just a digital olive branch wrapped in a profile picture with her new husband, and Emily. I didn't accept it, just stared at it. And then the messages started. She told me she understood why I was feeling distant. That family can be complicated. That Emily had always looked up to me, which was a bold-faced lie. Since the last time I saw that girl, she called me the emo step-cousin and asked if I was still poor. She was 10. Then came the second wave. A long message about how expensive college had become, how Emily was working so hard, how gifted she was. My mom casually dropped that they might have to sell their cabin in Flathead Lake to make ends meet unless someone could lend a hand. And just like that, my resentment solidified into something colder. Not rage, not even sadness. Just this icy, silent understanding that my parents were exactly who I always feared they were: opportunists. Sentimental only when it served them, family when it was profitable. I ignored the message. That's when the guilt campaign began. Old photos started showing up in my inbox. Me as a kid at Christmas. A birthday card from years ago. One picture of my mom holding me in the hospital room the day I was born. That one hit like a sucker punch. She followed that with a message: "You'll always be my baby. Don't let money come between us." I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Because here's the thing. They let me go over money, over inconvenience, over new families and easier lives. Now they wanted me back, just long enough to reach into my wallet. 2 weeks of silence followed. I thought maybe they'd finally taken a hint. But that was naive. This was just intermission. The next message came from someone I hadn't thought about in years: my dad's second wife, Beth. She used to pretend I didn't exist unless I clogged the shower drain or left my shoes by the wrong door. Her tone now? Sweet. Too sweet. She wrote that we've all made mistakes and that my father had been deeply hurt by our last encounter. Said he cried after he left my office. Claimed he hadn't slept in days. That it wasn't about money. That he just wanted to rebuild a relationship with his son. And then, bam, the punchline. He's been so worried about that small business loan he defaulted on last year. I think just a few thousand would make all the difference. There it was. Again, they didn't even bother spacing out the asks anymore. They just rotated messengers. And I'll admit, for a moment, I hesitated. I know how this sounds. But when people who abandoned you suddenly cry at your doorstep, something primal kicks in. You start wondering, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm punishing them for something they didn't know how to handle. Maybe they've changed. But then I remembered my high school graduation. I'd saved up to buy my own cap and gown because neither parent could be bothered. Carol clapped the loudest in the crowd, alone. Afterward, I stood outside waiting, holding my diploma in a cheap folder. I waited almost an hour. Neither of them showed. They weren't busy. They weren't sick. They just didn't come. That memory was like a knife to the gut, but this time I pulled it out and set it down on the table in front of me like evidence. Cold, unarguable, undeniable. So I replied to Beth's message with one sentence. I think your husband will figure something out, just like I did. She never responded. But that wasn't the end either, because someone else was about to crawl out of the woodwork. And this one I never saw coming. The next message didn't come through text or email. It came through the door. I was working late, again, reviewing distribution schedules in the back office when the chime rang from the front lobby. I figured it was a courier or a lost customer. But when I opened the door, I froze. It was Emily. She couldn't have been more than 20 now, standing there in an oversized university sweatshirt and brand new sneakers that probably cost more than my first car. She looked nervous, which was new. When I last saw her, she treated me like background noise at a family barbecue. Now, she stood clutching a folder like it held the key to her future. Maybe it did. She asked if we could talk. I thought about slamming the door, but something in her eyes made me pause. Not guilt, not exactly. Desperation, maybe. The kind of desperation I knew too well. So I let her in. She didn't waste time. Said she was sorry for how her side of the family treated me. That she didn't know the whole story until recently. That mom was a different person back then. I didn't answer. Just sat there and let her ramble. Then she opened the folder. It was her tuition bill. Full breakdown. Semester by semester. She told me her financial aid had fallen through. That her dad, my mom's husband, lost his job, and mom had maxed out their credit cards. She looked me in the eye and said the words that had clearly been rehearsed. You're successful now. You can help me. Just this once. I swear I'll pay it back. That did it. I stood up. Not in anger. Not in shock. But in something heavier. I told her I wasn't mad. I told her I didn't blame her for the choices our parents made. But then I said something I didn't even know I'd been carrying until it came out of my mouth. You're not the first kid in this family who needed help. I was. And no one showed up. Her face fell. I walked her to the door and handed the folder back. Told her I hoped she found a way. She turned as she left, asked if I could at least think about it. I said I already had, and then I locked the door. That was the last time I saw her. I thought that would be the end of it. I turned them all away, Mom, Dad, Beth, even Emily. I figured the silence that followed was real this time. Maybe they'd finally understood that I wasn't their safety net, that I wasn't going to bankroll the consequences of their choices. But what I didn't count on was how ugly people get when you stop letting them take. It started small. A 1-star review on my business's website with no comment. Then another, and another. Each one suspiciously vague. using words like rude, unprofessional, and overpriced, all from accounts that looked barely used. One even had a profile photo that looked eerily like my dad's neighbor from back in Idaho Falls. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Then came the phone calls, hang-ups during business hours, blocked numbers, a couple prank orders for deliveries that didn't exist. My warehouse manager thought we were being targeted by competitors. I knew better. They weren't just angry. They were trying to punish me. Then came the final straw, an email from a local journalist. Said she was doing a piece on community entrepreneurs and had received an anonymous tip that I'd inherited my business through shady family money. Asked if I'd like to comment. I stared at the screen, stunned. Someone out there was trying to rewrite my story, turn what I'd earned into a rumor, smear my name with just enough dirt to make people squint when they saw my logo. That night, I sat in my living room in the dark, one hand wrapped around a glass of bourbon I didn't even sip, just held it, staring out the window, wondering how the people who made me could turn so cruel just because I refused to let them use me. I had a choice to make. Let them chip away at me piece by piece, or finally fight back. Turns out I wasn't the only one keeping receipts. Carol, my aunt, the woman who raised me, fed me when my parents didn't, sat through my scraped knees and panic attacks, had quietly kept her own records over the years. She never said much, but she'd seen everything. Heard the missed birthday calls. Watched them forget me again and again. I told her what was happening. About the fake reviews, the email smear, the guilt tactics. She didn't even flinch. Just stood up, walked to her bedroom, and came back with a file folder. It was stuffed. Letters from my mom, unopened. Old checks from my dad that had bounced. School forms she'd signed because no one else bothered. There were even photos of me in the ER from when I'd had pneumonia at 13, Carol by my side, mom, and dad nowhere in sight. You ever need to remind the world where you really came from? She said, this'll help. I sat there flipping through it, and I swear it felt like reading my own forgotten biography. All the small abandonments I'd buried just to keep going. All the times she stepped in where they didn't. Then she dropped one more piece of gold. Turns out, she'd spoken to my grandfather before he passed. He'd wanted to leave that money to me directly, the full $2 million, but he worried it would cause conflict. So he left it with Carol and told her to wait, to see if I stayed true to myself, if I built something, if I didn't let the bitterness turn me rotten. She said I'd more than earned it. You think this is about money, she said, but they're not after the cash. They're after what it says about them, that you made it without them. That hit me like a freight train. It was never about the tuition or the debts or the sob stories. It was about control, about pride, about rewriting the story so they weren't the villains. Well, they don't get to write my ending. You'd think that after all that, I'd want revenge. But no, I didn't want to destroy them. I didn't want to humiliate them. I didn't even want them to suffer. I just wanted freedom. Freedom from their stories, their neediness, their rewriting of the past. I wanted my life to stop orbiting around people who once threw me out like trash, only to circle back the moment they smelled money. So I started telling the truth. Not to the press, not online, but to the people in my life who mattered. My employees, my friends, my board, the ones who heard whispers and saw the stress in my eyes, but didn't know where it came from. And when I started talking, something amazing happened. They believed me. No one rolled their eyes or said I was overreacting. My head of operations told me her father did the same thing when she got her inheritance. Came crawling with old photos and gas station roses. One of my drivers shared how his brother once sued him over land he didn't even want, just so he wouldn't feel left out. Turns out, betrayal has cousins everywhere. And little by little, that silence I'd been carrying, the one I thought made me strong, started to lift. Then I did one more thing. I took Carol's folder, the photos, the records, the evidence, and I scanned it all. Uploaded it to a secure drive. Not to post it, not to weaponize it, just to preserve it. My truth in black and white. A quiet fortress around my peace. And in case anyone ever tried again, I'd be ready. I stopped answering texts, blocked numbers, told my assistant to screen any media requests and filter anything that even hinted at anonymous tips. I didn't need a war. I needed closure. But of course, people like them don't take silence as an answer. And that's when the final move came. A move so petty and twisted, I actually laughed when I saw it. The envelope came on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, written in a shaky script that looked like someone trying too hard to be neat. Inside, a printed photo. One of me, or more specifically me and Carol, at a company holiday party from 3 years ago. She had her arm around me, both of us smiling in that rare, candid way you can't fake. Taped to the bottom was a note, typed in bold Arial. Funny how the woman who loved you waited until your grandpa died to hand you the cash. Wonder what else she's hiding. I sat with that for a long time. Not because I believed it, but because it was such a desperate, sloppy move. A last-ditch effort to wedge doubt between me and the only real family I'd ever had. They didn't go after my bank account this time. They went after my foundation. That's when it really hit me. They would rather tear me apart than accept that I was never theirs to claim. That I didn't know them. That I'd outgrown the cage they built and had the nerve not to look back. I told Carol about the letter. She didn't even blink. She said, "They've been trying to rewrite your story since you were 10. Let them write. You're the one who gets to live it." God, I love that woman. That night, I burned the photo. Not because it scared me, but because I wanted to reclaim it. That moment was ours. Not something they could twist into suspicion. They wanted to fracture me. Instead, they reminded me how solid I'd become. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Something in my gut told me I need to hear it when I was ready, not in the middle of running payroll or signing off invoices. Later that night, sitting on my porch with a mug of decaf and the mountain air cooling everything it touched, I hit play. It was my mom. Her voice was tired. Not rehearsed. Not weaponized. Just small. She said she was sorry. Not in the way people say it when they want something. Not the polished. I was only trying to do what's best. She said she didn't know how to raise a son who needed more than she was capable of giving. That by the time she realized how badly she'd failed me, I had already built a life without her. She said she'd watched my company grow from the sidelines, and for years she told herself I got lucky. But it wasn't luck. It was grit. It was grief turned into momentum. And then she said something I'll never forget. I never tried to fix things because deep down, I knew I didn't deserve to. There was a pause. Then she said she didn't expect me to call back, just that she wanted me to know the truth before it was too late. I sat there long after the message ended, phone still in my hand. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the old ache of wanting her to be better. I just felt free. I didn't call back, but I didn't delete the voicemail either. Some things deserve to be heard, even if only once. So here I am, 43 years old, sitting at a handmade pine desk in an office I built with the money they said I didn't deserve. The same desk where I signed paychecks for 30 employees. The same office where I once stood face to face with a father I barely recognized and a niece who reminded me what it feels like to beg with your eyes. And I'm not bitter. Not anymore. That's the twist no one ever talks about. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like a reunion. It looks like boundaries. Like a quiet life with people who show up. Like learning the difference between being needed and being loved. Carol still comes by on Sundays. We eat too much, watch old reruns, and never talk about the storm that nearly blew through our lives. She knows, and I know, we weathered it. Together. My mom sent one more letter. A real one, with a stamp and everything. She said she was on a therapy. That she wasn't asking for money, or contact, or even forgiveness. Just wanted to say thank you for not hating her. I didn't write back, but I read it twice. That felt like enough. Dad, I haven't heard from him since the day he left my office. I doubt I ever will. And strangely, that doesn't hurt anymore. I don't need closure from someone who was never really open to begin with. And Emily? I saw on social media that she transferred to a state school. She'll be fine. She's young, and life hasn't hardened her yet. Maybe this will be the moment she starts to shape her own story instead of repeating someone else's script. As for me, I'm still here in Missoula, still running my business, still drinking cheap diner coffee and waving to neighbors I actually know by name. But now I do it lighter, because I learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, the people who gave you life will be the very ones who try to take it apart. And sometimes, you survive anyway. And when you do, that life you build, that peace you protect, it's not selfish to keep it for yourself. It's sacred.